Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming at the end of the day here. I know it's tiring and you want to get to drinking, as do I. But we will, this is going to be sort of a conversation, so try to close your little laptops and various devices. And we're going to try to have a good conversation here about where social is going. And talk about, we have some great panelists here. This is a large panel. I think I was brought in because I did one recently at Twitter's, what was that called, Chirp or whatever? How funny. So I was brought in to sort of abuse a panel of dudes, and here I am again, which is my favorite thing. So again, once again, a panel of dudes. So it's essentially Sausage Fest Part 2. I think I can handle them though. So we're going to everyone's going to introduce themselves, and we have about an hour, and I'm going to spend the last 15 minutes of questions. It would be really great, because I certainly don't always ask the best questions. I ask some good questions, but I think you guys probably have better questions than I ever could. So just think of some questions you want to ask. We're going to talk about a wide range of things, from privacy to mobile, to where it's all going, to mistakes that you all might have made. I know it's not possible for Google to make mistakes because their brains are so big, but I think we're going to talk about where that's going. Don't laugh. Okay. Anyway, so let's introduce ourselves.
All right.
Starting here and going.
So my name is Chris Messina. I am the Google employee on the panel. I actually work in developer relations on the social web team, and I recently joined Google actually in January. So before that, I worked for myself as an independent consultant, and more recently, I've started working on the Buzz APIs. So doing a lot of work to move forward interoperability on the social web and open things up in general.
I'm Neal Sample. I'm Vice President of the Social, Open, and Publishing Platforms at Yahoo. I've been at Yahoo for about 6 years and in the Valley forever. So I guess I've probably seen all of it and built a third of it. And clearly, like the Google guys, have never made any mistakes or stepped in it.
Yeah, that's not true. Anyway, go ahead, next.
I'm Chris Cole. I'm a lead architect with MySpace Developer Platform and Open Social. And I've been there a couple years, taken some licks, and I predate the .com stuff, so I've seen the wave a couple times. And other than that, looking forward to the panel.
Great.
Hi, I'm Adam Nash. I'm the Vice President for Search and Platform Products at LinkedIn. So I'm responsible for our search engine and search capabilities, as well as our APIs, both on-site and off-site, and our mobile products.
Hi, I'm Angus from Microsoft, and I work on Windows Live, specifically the partnerships that we do around social technologies like Windows Live Messenger, Hotmail, and SkyDrive.
Hey, I'm Ryan Sarver, and I'm the director of the Twitter platform. For us, it's obviously all the third-party developers, APIs, content syndication, and I joined about a year ago, so it's been an interesting ride.
Great. Okay, I'm going to refer to you by like Twitter dude, Microsoft dude, LinkedIn dude, if you don't mind. Not to be rude or anything, but that's how I'm going to remember it best. So let's talk first. I know, just so you know, one group that's not here is Facebook, which is obviously, if you've heard of them, they're a big social network that people seem to like. They aren't going to be able to talk about themselves, so let's bash them. But one of the issues, obviously, this week around Facebook is, and we should have a Facebook person here. That said, issues around privacy have become a big deal this week. A lot of it focused on Facebook, but each of your companies, Google with Buzz, various, Microsoft had issues, Twitter's had issues with privacy and what happens in this thing. Let's start there, because that's sort of the hot button issue at this moment. So Chris, talk a little bit about how you look at this debate. Is it overblown? Is it something that's just too much? Do consumers care?
Sure.
That kind of stuff.
So this is one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people about lately, and I think that this is an industry-wide issue, which is why each one of us has had different experiences, I'd say, with privacy in general. And I think that on the one hand, there are expectations that are changing. The desire for people to be able to publish things and have their friends be able to find them in a way that's meaningful to them is very important. On the flip side of that, when people are surprised by information being shared that they hadn't necessarily anticipated being found by certain people, then that creates a kind of tension and erodes trust. So one of the hardest things that we're having to deal with now in general, and I say we as in the industry, is coming up with interaction models that I think address people's expectations and at the same time don't overwhelm them with too many choices. Because on the one hand, you can front load all this stuff, kind of like I'm sure everybody reads every terms of service before you install software. And so if you're willing to do that and you're one of those people, then you'd probably love 8,000.
You probably don't have any friends then. But
That's
anyway.
possible too. But you know, if we front load the user experience around the privacy stuff, then people won't use the stuff. If it's not made so that people have a clear understanding of where this stuff's going to go and who's going to see it, then they get upset later on. And I think there's an interesting balance. So one of the things that we're betting on, or at least that I think is necessary in the industry, is for more interoperability so that people can experiment, try new things, have different services that start up, let's say, as being public, like Twitter by default, and let that sort of flourish and see how that goes, and then try other services that start, you know, private by default, like email.
Right. Now, Yahoo hasn't done as much. They do a lot. They've been bringing Facebook in and some other services into the service. But in terms of, you tried Yahoo 360, but it wasn't it was a valiant effort, but did not work in any way whatsoever. But what?
It's huge in Vietnam,
Oh,
actually.
great.
Write that
Good
down.
job. It's like Orchid. I had Orchid saying, you know, we're big in Brazil. I'm like, nice work. Anyway, that said, how do you look at it? Because Yahoo's been very protective of people. It hasn't gotten stuck in these privacy problems. What do you think the big issues are when you look at the other companies? Or
Yeah, I think, you know, it's you know, we don't want to be throwing stones, you know, those folks who live in glass houses. I mean, we've still got a lot of investment in privacy, a large investment in trust. And of course, as soon as I say something, you know, some security hole is going to open up. You know, I think Yahoo has been more conservative than some of our partners. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why we still have a high level of trust. And I have to echo Chris's point. You have to make it simple. You have to make it obvious. You can't really front load the experience. If you go through all the nuance of the toss, again, it's not that there's anybody like that. They don't have friends. They just don't have software. The crap's too scary to start engaging. So you have to make it simple and you have to make it clean. But the interesting thing that I think we've seen, the thing that's perhaps unexpected, is that there's almost no limit to the level of recourse that folks seem to be giving right now for Facebook. That there's enough value in it that, you know, okay, we're gonna screw up and we're gonna, you know, tell everybody what your Christmas presents are, and then, you know, a couple years later we're gonna accidentally out you through an API, and a couple years later after that we're gonna move everybody sort of surreptitiously to public broadcasting of status, and then people will notice and they'll
then
spin up a
someday we'll be
group.
imprisoning people with red hair, but just because we don't like. I mean, it does.
The gingers are everywhere, right? And I don't know when people are going to rise up and say no. That's the thing that's really been surprising, is that they've
That's
had
Google
this.
I/O 2020. Just
Yeah,
so you know.
exactly. End of the gingers.
Yeah.
You know, folks have been burned several times, and yet they're still coming back. I have to believe that there's got to be a line somewhere, but we still don't know quite where it is. That again, we've sort of seen fast and loose play with people's privacy and industry, and nobody's really paying the price yet.
So MySpace was one of the original companies that really was sharing. I mean, sort of pioneered the idea of excessive sharing, some might say. You know, this has moved to a level well beyond that. At the time when MySpace started, it was somewhat controversial, somewhat embarrassing for some people.
Yeah, well, you know, MySpace came on kind of at the tail end of the dot-com bubble, and if you remember back then, everyone was absolutely beside themselves with fear with this whole notion of a cookie and that you might be attachable to what you're doing online. And this debate went on for many years. And then all of a sudden, people are enjoying sharing things with their friends. But what bothers me about the trend we're seeing is it's gone so far as there's a difference between posting something online and having it publicly available where maybe your friends will copy it and they might send it to someone you don't know or don't want it to have it. There's a stark contrast between that and having something broadcasted to everyone in the world without your necessarily being aware this is happening.
Just what Facebook just did.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, my children's pictures were up on the web, not with my friends, kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is...
What goes into the mentality of that? Because you guys you just put new privacy policies out.
Yeah, and some of that is more highlighting what we've already been doing. You know, we're constantly tweaking this, but we have a really deep background in respecting people's privacy, and there's been a number of things over the years where
you had the
private photos.
pedophile incidents.
Yeah,
I mean,
we've had a very sordid history
Yes.
of that,
yeah,
certainly.
that.
And we've,
Oh, those
that among other
pedophiles.
things, and we've cleaned up a lot of that over the time, so
Yeah.
we've been burned in our own right. You know, my fear is that this is going to be ignored by the industry to a point that it'll have to be settled through lawsuits and tort law, and that's kind of the precipice that we're walking up to right
Well,
now.
it's kind of a perfect thing for an attorney general to make a lot of noise over, for sure.
Yeah, and you're seeing that in Washington right now.
I think the FTC is going to move very soon, you know, if they feel brave. But let's go to Twitter first. You know, you guys are all about public broadcasting, so it's not as much of a, although you've added geolocation, things like that, where people somewhat are willing to do that. You guys started out sharing. I mean, Facebook, you started off thinking it was just your friends, and then they suddenly broadcast all your information outward. Google Buzz, I mean, even Walt Mossberg called me and said, who's my partner, called and said, I can't stop it. You know what I mean? And if someone who's like the world's expert on technology can't stop something from propagating, there's an issue. But you guys started out that way. So how do you, I mean, people know they're sharing with, you know, 1 million of their best friends kind of thing.
Yeah, I think part of it's about the premise that it's founded on. You know, we were somewhat fortunate through product decisions and kind of just luck in terms of stumbling on a certain model that resonate, but people came to the service having that expectation from day one, and you opt into that, and that expectation is shared throughout the network. When you start on a premise of private and small networks and have to then shift the user base to an area where you want them to share, I think that's where a lot of the consternation starts to happen, because most users aren't kind of in tune enough in the same way we are in the Valley around like what all of that actually means and what the implications 5-10 years down the road are. So it's very hard to let them understand the nuances over time. So we've been fortunate that we started out with that initial premise, and that seems to be the one that people are trending towards, and we're able to kind of stay where we are and then just execute
You're
on that.
adding more specific things, geolocation, you know, that kind of things, which is a little more intrusive, I would say.
Intrusive, but it's still opt-in, right? And we give people the granularity to choose what they want to share. And we talked a long time when we were originally doing geolocation. Do we want it to be like private and you choose who it goes to? It breaks the model. Like, we want what you share to be the exact same object that everyone else sees. So we try and do it in the same way, and we try and maintain that same kind of product vision that what you see about your own content and what your friend sees about your own content, if it gets syndicated out to Google to someone you don't know, they will see that exact same object. And so it's about the expectation of what you're sharing, but I think changes how people share and how people expect
Do you think
the service
most
to
of the
work.
things should be opt-in? Because this is opt-in is like a dirty word for most of these companies.
I think Chris hit on it a bit. It's a tough balance between like transparency and, you know, knobs to turn and all that kind of stuff, because users at some point there's a threshold that they just stop looking at them. So you can give them all the knobs in the world. I think that's what you're seeing with Facebook. There's a lot of good intentions to give people all the control they want, but users, like, they look at a toss, glean right over it.
Well, why can't it just be like a thing that pops up? We're about to put all your pictures out for all your stalkers to see, yes or no? Or, you know, I'm sure I can write something rather clear about what's going to happen.
Well, I think that's why you see the content shared on Twitter is very different than the content shared on Facebook,
Right.
right? You don't see a lot of photo albums of like families and stuff. You see a single shot of like some event or something you're expressing or experiencing, as opposed to these kind of like more personalized
But
content.
I'm wondering why it can't be easier. I mean, why?
I mean, it's the simple nuances of human nature, right? I mean, you're trying to take it and make it this digital thing that has knobs and selections, and there's different types of relationships, and data flows much more easily, which I think is also harder. When you're dealing with human relationships, it's a little easier to keep it contained, but where it's digital and it can flow throughout the network and be syndicated out to millions of people across the world instantly, kind of changes the nature of how you have to think about it.
But explaining it to people is that hard? I mean, I think that they're aggressively, purposefully being confusing in a lot of ways.
So actually, I would respond to that, because it's been interesting to watch how Facebook has tried to explain some of these things. Specifically, my girlfriend was using Facebook, and there was some time many months ago where they put up this terms of service change thing where they were inviting people to go participate, to read whatever it was that they were going to change. And it was there for 2 or 3 days at the top of the news feed.
Yeah.
I think this is before the redesign. And I asked her, you know, several days after, when she was like surprised that the terms had changed, like, you know, didn't you see that thing sitting at the top of your news feed, like blocking your view? And she's like, oh, I saw that, but I didn't engage with it. So we've had a similar experience, I think, with Buzz, where we've also provided certain types of disclosure about, look, you know, you can enable this if you really want to. And I think people are oftentimes, they have an objective in mind when they arrive at something, and they're going to blow through whatever else gets in their way.
Perhaps, I mean, unless you give them a chance. One of the things we did on Walt was very particular about making people aware of cookies, and our headline was,
Sure.
we're watching everything you do right now. Do you want to do something about it? We were very getting their attention. We're sneakily following you everywhere on the web.
I mean, I guess if
There
you use
are
it like
ways to
that,
alert
like there's
people.
someone looking over your shoulder right now, don't turn
Right.
around kind of thing,
Right.
maybe that would work. But I think when we've tried to do a lot of these things across all these different sites in a
People
way
don't
that
pay attention.
isn't too alarmist,
Right.
but still informs, I mean, you're right, unless we're
Why not
screaming
be
at them.
alarmist?
I think that
Like the weird guy from high school can find you now. Something like that.
I'd be willing to A/B test that. You guys want to try that?
So Microsoft, one of the, you guys, how do you look at, because you have a business part that is quite privacy oriented and then, have struggled in the consumer space more, but how do you look at this idea where people are doing this sort of aggressive sharing?
Yeah, I think, well, the key thing is that privacy is in our DNA. I mean, like you said that there's the business side where we are quite private. There's one privacy, like central organization inside Microsoft, or our trustworthy computing. That's a part of every engineering process, whether you're working on like shippable software, like box product, or whether you're working on online services. So, I mean, when it comes to Windows Live specifically, I think a lot of what Chris said is important. Like, do not surprise people. And the scary thing about that is that if someone's surprised, then you've already done something wrong. Like, people need to be able to choose who can see what of theirs, and they need to be able to either get granular, or we need to make sure that the defaults are set to an appropriate level. So it's just about expectation management. And I mean, I think it's about 500 million people currently have Windows Live IDs. That's a huge number of people that we want to make sure we get privacy right for.
Do you think it's because Microsoft, on the promiscuous scale, Facebook's way down here, Microsoft hasn't been as successful because of their lack of promiscuity? I'm trying to, you know what I mean?
I mean, I'm not even going to go there, actually.
Okay, you're not as easy, so.
Yeah.
But why? I mean, do you need to have to do that? Do you need to have to get there to be successful, to be that, give?
I don't think so. I think you can build a perfectly good business that satisfies tons of consumers and advertisers by keeping everything legit.
Right. I'll move to a vacuum cleaner metaphor. They have a giant sucking vacuum cleaner. Yours is set on a less level. I mean, can you be successful when it's not like that? When it's not sucking every piece of information ever about you indiscriminately?
I think you could absolutely be successful. Yeah, definitely.
LinkedIn guy, dude. So you guys, I have to say, I think do have the easiest to use tools and people on LinkedIn do want to share. They want to share information about themselves, a lot for jobs, a lot for job search and stuff like that. And so the intent is very clear. I find the tools simple to use. It's very clear about what you're putting up, who's getting what. And it's actually quite protective of a lot of things.
Well, I think that's actually part of what makes this problem so hard. Sorry, everyone? I think that's part of what makes this such a hard problem across the social web is that context really matters. This isn't just a technical problem. It isn't just a cognitive problem understanding what we could or couldn't do. The fact is no one ever writes down social contracts, right? Communities form them, they evolve. We've been very fortunate. LinkedIn has always taken privacy very seriously because in business context, there is some information that you really do guard, right? Mm-hmm. If you are unhappy with your employer and you're looking around for a new job, that's something very private. We take it very seriously that we always want people on LinkedIn to feel like they put their best foot forward. We would never want to embarrass someone. On the flip side, LinkedIn users have always been, ever since we launched the feature, delighted to find out that the first time that someone Googles them, that their LinkedIn profile comes up high, because that professional side of you, that professional persona that we all spend decades kind of working on through our careers, that's actually the default one that a lot of people are comfortable with a stranger seeing. And so I think, LinkedIn has done well in this area, but I think that's partially because we're very focused on our context and what our users want from that context.
But you don't have a whole lot of information on your thing. I mean, I love LinkedIn because I'm able to reach all the Yahoo executives I want to leak to me, for example. Mm-hmm. But, and Facebook works really well too. Sorry, not you. So, not yet. But do you need to add more stuff to that? Because do you imagine you don't have any it's somewhat, it's not the right word, it's somewhat plain vanilla kind of stuff.
It's focused.
It's like a resume. It's looking at someone's resume with a little bit more.
Yeah, so we have certainly a mix of information that people share, et cetera, but for the most part, your professional profile, first and foremost, is that first value proposition that people get, that, hey, when someone looks for me online, they're going to see me this way. This is my role at LinkedIn. Previously, I worked at these companies. I went to this school. We spend a good chunk of our lives accumulating these experiences and skills, and so I wouldn't say we don't have a lot of information. I think it actually is not only a significant amount of information, I think it's very important to people. It's just in this context, that's how people want to present it.
Do you imagine having more information there, like more pictures, videos, things like that?
To be honest, we're very, in that way, we react to what our users want. So I think that as more and more users want more rich content, we'll probably provide more rich content. But really it responds to what do people feel like they need to represent themselves professionally online. To date, that hasn't involved a lot of that rich media. People don't feel like they need to represent themselves professionally with photo albums of their kids or that sort of thing.
Right.
I don't think that that's likely.
Right. That's what I think. Okay, let's move on to, before we get into privacy, what do you think the greatest mistake has, by your own company, by another thing, that has been the greatest mistake made in this area so far? Chris, you start.
You know, I'm new at Google, so I don't have like a whole long legacy, but I think one of the things that was very interesting to sort of watch unfold was the interesting of the collapsing of contexts with Buzz and Gmail. So we use Buzz internally at Google to great effect, I think. And it's been a very, very positive thing, especially when I first started working at Google. It was a great way to learn about my coworkers and to learn what was going on. One of the things that's very interesting about dogfooding a lot of these things is that we learn about the products early, we try them out, we get great use cases. And you know, we have a very clear, I think, idea about how email works and how Buzz works and things like that. And so watching people's I guess, questions about...
I would say horror, but go ahead.
Questions about the way that they interpreted Buzz being in their inbox was something that was fascinating, I guess, because it's like, oh, like people expect that if there's this public context within an inbox, then all of a sudden their inbox is going to be made public as well. And of course, that's not the case, and never was the case, but there were a lot of people that had that concern. And I think that there's also a greater context where there's been conversations happening about Facebook and about Twitter and about all these other social services where people just hadn't anticipated this type of social environment to be merged in this very different type of social environment.
It. Well, it's the way you got in, the way you're trying to get into Facebook is sort of run away with the other part. Right.
You said it. So I think it's been interesting to see that unfold. And one of the things that I'm most excited about with the API is to actually allow people to build external and different contexts for the Buzz experience that can give people a different type of social expectation or social environment in which to conduct that type of activity.
Do you think it was a question of communication, or that Google people just aren't like other people, regular people? What? I'm saying the last one is true no matter how you slice it, but what do you think the problem
There's
was?
something special about Googlers for sure. But I think there's also a different type of expectation and desire that a lot of us have at Google to be able to share with one another.
Your test group of dog food eating was not a usual group of people.
It was, for someone new to Google, it was very eye-opening.
Okay. What about?
You know, I think one of the interesting things about Yahoo is that, you know, collapsing context is not just an exception like a Buzz and Gmail kind of combination. It's more like, you know, taking a scoop of everything at Baskin & Robbins and putting it in a blender and then mixing in some motor oil and then, you know, saying, drink this. You know, yeah, they did. It's a new product. The McSlurry. But you know, the interesting thing is, you know, we had listings properties, right?
Yeah.
Where folks were there at hot jobs. You know, you were there for sort of this commercial intent job seeking. We had Yahoo Personals, where you were actually there looking for somebody, but you sure as hell didn't want anybody to know you were looking for somebody. And then we have email, and then we have photos in the form of Flickr, and then we have media experiences, where sometimes it's programmed, and other times it's sharing, it's groups, it's answers, it's message boards, it's all these sorts of things. And so the biggest challenge, and I think a thing that we never really have solved and has again led to some of our conservatism, is that it's seemingly impossible to cross all of those streams. Is that when you start with a sort of vertical notion, you know, whether it's sort of LinkedIn, right? It's business oriented, it's very specific, the purpose is there, or even Twitter, where it's a channel. You just say, look, I've got a channel and I'll let the user program it in any way they want. It's fairly straightforward to go ahead and manage that. And so I think one of the reasons we've been slower and have missed opportunities, if you will, that other folks have captured, like 360, is that there was no compatible way to mix all of the Yahoo pieces together. And so I think that remains a challenge.
It wasn't confusing to the user.
Right. That wasn't confusing, and therefore we didn't do it. Right.
Because it does freak them out. I remember when Facebook went on Huffington Post and I didn't turn the thing off. I wasn't in stealth mode, and then I realized everyone realizes all I read is Britney Spears stories and Lindsay Lohan stories.
We knew.
I know you know. But arrested. She's getting. She is, by the way. When she enters the state again, she'll be in jail. Deservedly. But I mean, I think it was the lack of, it doesn't mix. I was just reading the
Yeah.
Huffington Post, and all of a sudden I was sharing my strange predilections for
And
celebrities.
we had an internal discussion recently about Facebook like buttons.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, when you share something on Yahoo, it's not as bad as your stalker buddy's going to see it, but we are sort of in your face. It's a proactive notification, and there is a message that says this is who it's going to go to. If we were to take like buttons and put them all over our media pages or sports, and you wanted to like a team or like a sports figure, there's no notification. It's a different model. And so, maybe it's okay for those users for a while until, again, the next boo-boo or mistake happens. But, we found that even the open parts of the web are a bit more promiscuous than our users are willing to take.
What about it, MySpace? Or anywhere else?
Yeah. So I would say, with regards to privacy, there's probably two mistakes I've seen over the years. The first one would be to initially over-allow photos and things that should be private to get out there. Like early on, you alluded to it, a lot of the problems with the under 18 versus over 18, and how do you manage privacy between these groups. And because of those early mistakes, the company overcorrected and has been very conservative in how we allow people to share. And in some ways, I think we've put in undue friction. Like when we initially launched the developer platform, one was allowed to invite one friend at a time to share some sort of game or app with them. And the reaction was developers found workarounds to that were incredibly annoying to the user. And we've missed on opportunities like Twitter's broadcast channel that perhaps we would have been really well positioned to take advantage of had we continually re-examined this notion of privacy. So it's a really hard line to walk where you're private enough that you're not damaging your user base, but public enough that you're allowing people to have social experiences.
When I think of different challenges we've had here, actually, similar to Yahoo, we may have had a little bit of the reverse, where I'm very excited that we were able to launch the open developer platform for LinkedIn around Thanksgiving. That was only about 6 months ago. Until then, people who wanted to build business applications or other applications that integrate with LinkedIn, they either had to queue up and wait for kind of personal attention, which of course, being a small company, was hard to provide. Or they'd have to find another way through the shadows, through the gray areas. And everyone knows we're all very clever. We can come up with clever ways to solve these problems. One of the benefits of having an open platform now means that, first of all, our users have come to expect that they've invested a lot of time in their LinkedIn identity connections. They don't really understand why all applications don't have access to that information. They expect that if they give permission, that they should be able to access that anywhere on the web. But more importantly, it brings that activity into the light. Right now, people are using a real robust authentication system. People are now putting all that activity through in a way that our standards for privacy can be enforced across all those interactions. So while I'm very proud that we have the open platform today and we're actively working on improving it and expanding it, I think it was a mistake to not have it until 6 months ago. I mean, there were a lot of things we were figuring out, but I'm glad that we have it now.
A few people have talked about missed opportunities, and I think that what I would like to see more of is actually spending time together working on these complex problems. So I was just at Internet Identity Workshop earlier this week down at the Computer History Museum, and there were key people from each of the large and small online services all in one place. That should be where I personally want to drag my engineers down to. I want to spend more time. I want to get more people from these companies to spend more time. And I think that's both a challenge and it's also a competitive advantage.
I like that coming from Microsoft. You mean you regret being a bully for all those years? You should. Just say it. It's so funny. Microsoft is so friendly now. It's really hard. I covered the Microsoft. I covered the Microsoft trial. You weren't always so friendly. Just FYI. But it's nice. Angus. It's the accent. It's Scottish, right? Yeah. Anyone who talks Scottish to me, I'm like, oh, you're so.
I'm
nice.
Australian. Come on.
Australia. Whatever. I don't know. Oh no.
Are you Canadian?
See? All right. I like Australians too. No, I'm not Canadian. Although I was married in Canada, not that anyone cares, but anyway. Sorry.
You know, I think we're still going through our learnings. I think such a different model. We're still trying to figure out where the edges of it are, what mistakes we're making. I think some of ours aren't going to show up for a little while longer.
Fail
'cause it's
well.
still so
I'd go
early.
right to fail well.
I mean, it's too obvious sometimes. To go after
Not
some of
really.
those, but
Pretty big mistake.
I mean, there's all sorts of company learnings, but if we're talking about the social aspect of it, I think some of that is still kind of yet to be determined, and allowing applications to, like, for you to give trust to an application, they can essentially go do anything for your account. We've kind of fought very strongly to keep away these, like, very discrete permissions around this app can do this and this app can do that, because I think we don't want to get into that kind of, like, checkbox fever of,
The
like,
other thing is, if it becomes third-party applications, then you do want to say that, because that's not Twitter necessarily. I mean, that's an issue on Facebook when you give permission to third parties who you don't know who they are.
well, and so I go about that the other way. I think trying to give the granular permissions to apps up front aren't the right way to go. It's more about policing them and using trust models within social graphs to try and understand which apps you trust, as opposed to saying, this app can do these
So the
things.
company should be the one determining who's trustworthy.
No, I think it's the users and the set of users that determine which apps are trustworthy. We actually, back to this idea of, like, expectations, in our privacy policy, we've said, like, don't surprise users with anything you do, and if you surprise them for any reason, like tweet on their behalf and you didn't make it clear enough, you may have thought you made it clear enough, but if they're still surprised, we have the ability to revoke your application.
Okay, let's talk about mobile, where we're going with mobile. This is sort of I think we'll combine geolocation and mobile, where that's going, and then we'll finish up talking about, and then get to questions about where things, sort of where it's all going. And even, there's so many social networks and so many choices people have to join now. You have to be on Foursquare, then you're on Facebook, and then you're on MySpace. It's very confusing for users. I think we'll talk a little bit about that. But let's very quickly talk about mobile and how you look at it. I think it's critically important, a lot of this mapping and location, and it creates a more useful experience in a lot of these social scenes. So why don't we start, I mean, how do you look at the mobile space right now, and where do you think the key players are in it?
I mean, mobile is, back to this original point, mobile is part of our DNA. I mean, that's where Twitter, the short code, and the short character count, all that stuff is pure mobile. We happen to have a web service that allowed you to surface the content, but it was about sharing things on the go in real time with people and pushing messages back and forth. So everything we do has a very kind of deep mobile consideration. Location is something very kind of near and dear to my heart, too, because I've spent a bunch of years in that. I'm really excited to see this kind of confluence of, like, real-time, location, and mobile all coming together, because all sorts of new kind of use cases and experiences are going to come together and kind of flourish because of those things coming together at one time.
What's the most interesting use you've seen of that so far?
Some of the ones I personally love are, like, the food carts and emergency accounts that are saying this, like, real-time data that's, like, pertinent to you because it's about the proximity in your relationship to it. There's an @emergency NSF account, and there was a gas leak, like, 2 blocks away from my apartment the other day, and I get device updates for that. And granted, it was just outside of the zone, but it's something you want to know. I wouldn't have tapped into the web to notice that. So you want that to your device. It would be better if the device knew exactly where I was and where the originating tweet was, and could make that connection easier.
Get away from the gas leak?
Get away from the gas leak, yeah. If you get this, run.
Run now.
Yeah, run now. We're not going to tell you which direction, but. So I think that's the kind of stuff that I love seeing, those kind of use cases come out of it. And I think we're going to see more and more of those as all those technologies kind of come together. Location for so long was so impossible to get to, and now it's, like, free on every major device, and that is just like game-changing in so many ways. And I'm excited to see how it starts to play out.
In a lot of ways, it's
all the
becoming
services.
more specific, which is nice, really locating you nearby. One of the things Walt tested once was these things you put on children, and you locate them, except the kid was always, like, 3 blocks away from where it said it was. It was close, and the company was like, well, it's close. And we were all like, do you have children? Because if the pedophile is 3 blocks away, it was like this, but now it's becoming quite location. We're happy it's getting specific. Anyway, so Angus from Australia.
I'm glad you remembered my name.
I do.
It's no longer Microsoft guy, it's Angus. Thank you.
Microsoft dude from Australia. Anyway, Aussie, kangaroos, I got it, koalas. Shrimp on the Barbie. How do you look at location? You guys are doing amazing things in mapping. I mean, in that area, Microsoft's been incredibly aggressive and really giving Google a run for its money in terms of, like, putting out features and doing kind of interesting stuff in mapping. So I think you and Google are pretty leaders in this area, sort of in pioneering innovations.
In terms of location, I think location is about exactly where you're at, and that means there could be physical harm. Like, someone could stalk you. If you accidentally connect it to a network that leaks it out to the public web, that's, like, real danger. So it needs to be watched super
Or if you
carefully.
leave your house. I'm leaving my house now with my 16 iPads and that kind of thing. Like, please, help yourself.
Yeah, I think the thing that bums me about location and mobile is that there's so many different places where my friends spend time. So I've got some friends on Foursquare, all the hip ones. I've then got some other unhip friends on Goala, and some other services.
Leave poor Goala alone.
And it's hard for me to stay across exactly what they're doing. And if I want to be able to consume that information, I want to be able to bring together the places where I feel I have people I care about, and I quickly want to get that into an easy-to-consume
So
interface.
you like to have it federated in some fashion.
Yeah, and that's some of the stuff we've been working on with Windows Live Messenger in terms of bringing in the things you care about from
Well, your
your
company
best
would be
friends.
one that could federate it. Facebook is another, Google's another. I mean, in terms of there being so many of them. There's Booyah, there's all kinds of ones. You guys just did the Booyah
Yeah,
deal.
I mean, we've been doing some of this with the social networks. So we announced a partnership with Facebook, MySpace, and LinkedIn.
And you did a Foursquare one too, I think.
There was a brief little demo with Foursquare. But once again, location is an area that need to be careful, and you pointed out that we were down one end of the scale, and I think that's probably a space that I'm not sure where we're moving in terms of location.
Are there location issues with LinkedIn?
Not issues.
Must rush for this job down the street?
Yeah. Well, if the economy had gone a certain way, that might have been a bigger thing. We'll probably be active consumer location. Actually, events like this are a big part of where we hear from professionals, right? People want to know not just which of their connections are here at the conference, but who are the people they should meet at this
Well,
conference?
that sounds really annoying, I have to tell you, but go ahead.
Well, it cuts both ways. I mean, this is what we're hearing from users, right? We haven't built a feature like this yet, but what we hear from professionals is that, there are some people who are here, Google I/O, for fun and entertainment, but most people are here because it directly relates to what they do for a living, their job, the professional, building their skills. A lot of people spend their time figuring out who they can meet here, when they can meet, and that sort of thing. And we don't have all those pieces, but we do have that professional context. We do have reputation, their connections, et cetera. So we do think we have a role to play to provide some of those features to make that a more productive experience. I mean, in an ideal sense, it would help you just as much make sure that you're spending your time with the people you should be, rather than ending up spending your time just with whoever you randomly run into to some extent. So.
Good point, that's a good point.
For us, as we're looking at the trends, it's very clear that all of the growth is on mobile, and something like 30 to 50% of our users are dealing with mobile devices, and I think it's a majority of status updates are coming from mobile devices. So it's very clear that mobility in this kind of always on, always with you connection is really kind of where the social
You guys are doing a lot of
web.
events around that, about event going and
Yeah,
entertainment.
we're doing a lot of geolocation, not so much at the point geolocation. At this point, more kind of geolocation at you're in this city, and then these are the concerts coming towards you that you might be interested in. But it's also kind of interesting because I forget who I was talking to, but they were looking at the usage patterns, and so mobile devices are used first thing in the morning and then very late at night, right before you go to bed, and the type of content you're going to tailor to that is going to be very different than, say, looking through someone's photo album of their trip to the Caribbean and their marriage.
Something cool you've seen it used for.
Well, something I haven't seen yet that may be out there would be kind of location-based activity stream updates so that you could then prioritize what's around you, the stuff that's really happening. Because right now the stream comes through and it's your friends, which there's some geolocation just naturally from that. But something that, we consume the Twitter stream, we have partnerships with a lot of people, so we have this massive amount of data, and if you could create some sort of graph node structure that then had location and it made it more relevant by location, that would be very interesting.
Coming through in a
thing.
fire hose now, and it's somewhat
Yeah,
irrelevant.
I mean the
so
fire hose is
interesting.
amazing, but it is just
No,
a
it's
fire hose.
interesting,
You
but
can't drink it.
ultimately relevant. Although I recently used Foursquare to bother Fred Wilson because he was at a restaurant around the corner. I was just like, "Hi, nice to see you," and it freaked him out. Even though he's an investor in Foursquare, he's like, "How did you find me?" I'm like, "You're an idiot." So he was so strange. what do you see that's interesting in mobile? Some interesting use of it, or where do you imagine that?
Yeah, I think, for Yahoo, mobile is just sort of obvious. One of the differences for the way we do it.
You have a mobile announcement Monday. You want to tell us what it is?
Mojan would kill me.
Yeah, well, I'll be writing about it tonight. But go ahead.
I heard when she was walking
Yeah.
over that you'd already gotten there.
Yeah.
Suck it. So, one of the interesting things is traditionally,
Yeah.
mobile has been more of a read experience
Right.
for
You guys
Yahoo.
had Yahoo Go,
That's
which
right.
was another valiant.
Yeah.
Valiant.
Marco, love
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
I know he was a friend of yours, but
Not really.
for us it was a read mostly experience, and so we haven't, because we're not often writing location except to our own APIs, because you're searching for a restaurant or a review, or you're there on search and you're drawing a picture around the neighborhood that you want results from, that kind of thing. It's not as much of a challenge in the social space because we tend not to be exposing. Or if you look at the new iPad app, it's there about consuming media, whether it's video content or reviews and that sort of thing. So for us, it's an obvious vehicle to push our content, to push our experiences, but we haven't had sort of the same privacy concerns because we're not generally publishing from the devices as often. So we use the mobile queues, we use the geo signal and that sort of thing, but it's far less intrusive because we don't have a privacy issue there.
What would you like to see Yahoo do?
In the ideal world, it would be nice to just forklift everything, that you could take Yahoo, run it through a magic filter, and then all of a sudden it's appropriate for a 2-inch UI. I think, there's some promise in HTML5 and some other technologies that will get us closer to that as we move to standards and portable development that'll work well in both places. But, it's more of a technology thing than a social thing. I mean, that's the ideal, is sort of the right once run anywhere, and I don't have to care if it's on an IPTV or a set-top box or a full-fledged PC or heck, a 2-inch device, right?
It's a nice dream.
Yeah, it is. It's the holy grail.
The impossible dream.
Yeah.
Actually, on that point, I would say that that's a nightmare, being a designer by training, because I feel like when we separate out mobile from other types of computing experiences, we tend to put it in this little bastardized tube that says, have these experiences over here, and we just want to take all these desktop experiences and just throw them into this small 2-inch, real estate, and things are just going to magically work out. And I actually think that mobile demands and deserves a certain type of thinking that's much more contextual, that takes much less for granted,
Right.
and greatly simplifies the computing experience. So a while ago, I sort of started thinking about how there's this emerging trend in computing that I call pop computing, which is about kind of simplifying these experiences that we take for granted that we'll have with a mouse and a keyboard, and getting them down into a single a single finger touch. And that changes everything.
Sure.
That's a fundamental paradigm shift.
Well,
and
isn't
so
computers all, don't you feel, I feel that computers are going, I have a 5-year-old who literally, every screen he touches,
Yeah.
he
it's
bangs
basically
on it
yeah,
like
it's
a, like a
broken
village
if you
idiot.
can't
He's
touch it, right?
yeah,
So we have these weird, stupid screens that sit there, and you paw at them, and they don't do anything. And it's well, it's broken. So in a couple years, I can imagine people are going to have these expectations, or they're going to look back at us, sitting in these weird cubicles with these computers that we interact with in this way that seems very foreign to them because they're used to having tactile experiences. So if you couple that tactile experience in mobile devices with location, which is all about relevancy and what's around you and what's very immediate to you, I think people's expectations are changing. And so we have to think about the context that someone's going to find themselves in from a social perspective, from a geographic perspective, and from an immersive sort of are they driving while they're tapping on your device? And if so, you really should not be having 40 lines of text in front of them. So it demands a whole new discipline that I think we have to consider, and not just port what we've had to that.
Very good point. Countryman of Nicole Kidman. I'm just curious, Microsoft had a wonderful movie a couple years ago about this idea of on the go, also Russell Crowe. They had a really good movie about this idea of on-the-go computing kind of thing. Did you see it? It was called The Future of the Future, or something like that. It was one of those great Microsoft movies of things they're never going to make, but it looked terrific. It was you touch things, you move, you sweep things.
Minority Report?
No, it was like Minority Report. It was really cool.
I've seen a couple of things like that. I haven't seen that one, but I saw
Terrific.
the Office 2019.
Yeah, something like that.
Workplace of the future.
Right.
Actually, sorry, Chris, I was sitting next to someone with a laptop, a Windows PC, and they were tweaking the screen yesterday. So,
So
that
it's coming,
happens.
right?
That happens. And sorry, one last thing I just wanted to update. what cuts me really deep about mobile and social is that I have a set of friends. I use a certain device because it was given to me for work. You guys use other devices for whatever reason. I hate that the device or the app defines who I can interact with in a certain
Very
way.
good point.
That really bums me
Well,
out.
that's perfect. Let's get to that. Devices. Now, let us try not to insult Apple 27 times today. It's gotten a little much, frankly.
I
but
love 'em.
You
It's
do?
great, yeah.
Okay, good. Your boss, not so much. But let's talk about the important devices. We're getting into this ridiculous, juvenile, typical of Silicon Valley war between all these platforms, with Apple and Google being the most obvious, but Facebook and Google and all these people in these different, and all the devices fighting with each other, and then Palms over here, dying slowly until HP buys them. How do you look at, that was a good save. How do you look at this idea, which you're talking about, Angus? It's problematic because there are all these little sort of, fascist organizations here and here and here, and you belong to the, it's like the Tea Parties versus the crazy liberals versus, the nutters. We, in this country, our politics have now become the nutters are running on each side of the spectrum, are running everything, and the people in the middle are just vomiting, quietly in their mouths. So how do you look at that? How does this solve itself when these devices don't, I have a Nexus One, but there is a certain use case of these things that you become this Apple person or this Google person.
I think the key thing is that, first off, Chris mentioned that experience on mobile is key. And generally, you'll see the first party, like the service owner, build a killer client, a la Twitter. You guys build a killer client for certain devices. And then it comes down to, well, what other devices do people want to build for? And making sure that, like, as a service owner, you should be saying, I'm not going to build for that device, but I'm going to go and find the best person that builds on that device, and I'm going to give them all of the love and the attention so they can satisfy the people that have friends that use my services on other devices.
But you do have to choose now. A lot of these, even with our site, we not want to spend a lot of money, but we went to the iPhone first, and then we were going to go to the BlackBerry, and then we decided to go to the Android, but here's the iPad. I guess we'll go to the iPad first. It just becomes, and for developers, worse. And again, these wars that are going on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I think that this is actually pretty important. Mobile is a big deal for us because professionals have two things. They tend to be higher income, so they can afford these latest devices and services, and then they're never at their desks, so they really depend on their mobile devices. But I don't see the reverse there. It is a problem, but it becomes an obligation from a design standpoint. People pick their devices for reasons, and I don't think it's wrong to ignore them, right? We haven't released an Android application yet, although we're, working on one.
Your first one was an iPhone one, right?
The first one was an
As
iPhone.
are most people's.
But you have to ask that question, why do people love the iPhone, right? That's part of why they chose that device, and that fits into what do they need to go. Like, when we design our applications, we don't say, well, what parts of the website can we bring onto this mobile device? It's, we have a mobile professional. What do they need to get done on the go, quickly, easily? And how can we bring it to them in a way that they're truly going to enjoy? A mobile device, unlike a PC, is a very personal device. It knows everyone you're connected to. You pick it, and there's this, and the tactile thing even makes it even more personal. So it may be a problem in terms of you can't possibly build your app for 100 different devices. But for me, at least from the design perspective, it feels very important to make sure that if you're going to build an application for Android, it's got to be a great Android application.
But I'm talking about the ability of being in these silos, which is the opposite of open.
I think in this crowd in particular, we talk about, iPhone versus Android and whatnot, and we're ignoring this entire class of devices out there that, we have a much younger skew on our user base, so these aren't people that can walk out and plop down $200 for a device. You live in Silicon Valley, you live in Seattle, you walk around, and everyone's got their iPhone in their hand, and now more and more you see a lot of Androids. But the reality is that you're ignoring a significant portion of the population if you don't look at the older feature phones and the WAP browsers and what they can do. This is, I would say, I wish I had committed all these statistics to memory, but it was close to the 50% mark over or under our older WAP devices that are connecting to our site. And, we talk about what we're doing, but particularly in a social situation, you're trying to get information interaction out as wide as possible. So even if you're going and hitting all the smartphones, you're still completely ignoring
At
a
the same
huge
time, though,
portion of the market.
although the trend is towards these smartphones, I mean,
Clearly that's where it's going,
everyone's
but
gonna
it's
have,
still
I
a
mean,
couple
young
years
people,
out.
old people, as soon as they, that we're showing like 10 tablets a D in a week, and they're going to be cheap and eventually go down. And with the kin, by the way, the kin was on Gossip Girl the other night. That was fascinating. That idiot Chase Crawford was trying to, anyway. But it was cool to see. But people will have smartphones, and so therefore it does become this kind of thing. We're going to go to questions now, but what's the most important device right now in the mobile space? You first.
Wow. It's a terrible question.
No, it's not. It's a great one.
I'm really excited about the Chrome TV today, the Google TV.
Okay.
In the sense that it's not a mobile device, but in the sense that it takes the Android platform, pushes it into a new environment,
Right.
and provides this way of actually doing all this cross-platform development that, to me, working on identity for the last couple of years,
Tough area.
raises.
People have tried. This has been a
Yeah,
battlefield.
and it raises a
for
lot of
many.
questions about how you actually take an Android device, interact with your TV, bring that into other places and contexts and so on. So it's forcing the boundaries of these things to actually congeal in ways that are unnatural. So
Yeah, it's a tough. It's taken many prisoners. This particular area over the years.
Yeah, so I'll cop out on this one. I think the answer is it's whatever's in the consumer's pocket.
Oh,
is
good
that you
God.
have to deliver your app, and so I'll give my own story. In
Short,
this
we gotta get to
pocket,
questions, yeah.
it's the iPhone. In this pocket, it's the BlackBerry, right? But with my iPhone, I mean, the car I bought recently, one of the features it had to have was an iPhone jack. And why does it need an iPhone? Well, because I read more on my Kindle now on the iPhone. I actually, Rhapsody plays on the Sonos, it plays on the TiVo, and it plays on the iPhone. And so the interesting thing, I think, is that when you get convergence, for me, the phone isn't an end, it's a means to get to the stuff that's interesting. And I think, the approach we have to take is, sometimes we call them hero devices in the industry, is that we focus on those devices because they're going to enable so much for users. And you can, again, try to leverage whatever you have into a WAP device. But at the same time, I think it's important to say, look, I can carry the entire ecosystem of this user. I can do a better job. I can get them their music. I can get them their content. I can get them the books, whether it's DRM or not, yada, yada, yada. So I think whatever consumers have, if you can bring your experience there, that's how you win. It's about the experience existing on the device. And if you can't carry it to the device, then, it's not that interesting.
Next, very briefly, because I want to get to questions.
I think putting on my developer hat, it has to be the iPad, and because it brings in the question of the whole tablet form factor. It's, 10 months ago, it was, oh my Lord, we have a 3.5, 4-inch screen that we now have to program for. And now it's created this new level of uncertainty. It's hard enough that the Droid has a different aspect ratio from the G2 or the Ion phone. And now it's like, well, that's like the least of our concerns. So how's that answer going to come? Is it now you're going to be developing a web application, an iPhone application, an Android application, an iPad application, a Google TV application, and oh, now we're getting screens in cars, so you're developing one for the Volt in the back seat. So it's this uncertainty in how developers are going to address this and figure out either increasing their effort to bring in clients and all kinds of new experiences. Is it going to be market segmentation? It's just it just puts a finger on how disruptive these new devices are going to be.
Very briefly, sorry, do you want to, sorry.
Yeah.
Quick,
Huh?
quick.
iPad, different reason. I think the iPad is a signal of everything becoming effectively a mobile device, not just the traditional things we think of as phones. When I think of the use cases of someone with an iPad, someone with an iPhone, someone with an Android device, how they interact together, I think bringing the power of mobile computing to all devices, I didn't think I'd have to think that hard about it when the iPad was announced. When I got one, I've been playing with it
You
for a
do
few
get it,
weeks.
yeah.
It's a big deal.
And some of the others coming out are very exciting.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty jazzed about the Windows Phone 7.
Of course you are.
No, I'm particularly
You guys
jazzed
keep trying.
because I have one of a handful in my backpack, so I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
And what I really actually like about it is, what I've been working on with Windows Live is bringing together other places where I spend time, connecting it to Windows Live. when I turned on my Windows Phone 7 and connected it to my live account, including my Facebook account, I saw the activities that I see in Messenger and I'll see in Hotmail, which we just announced. I saw those, but on the phone in the right context. When I flipped the photos, I saw it in a really nice way. And I was just like, wow, I can stay across all of what my friends are doing on this device as well.
It's called the iPhone, but great. Okay. I'm teasing.
You get to see it.
Crocodile Dundee, I do too.
And to
I've
me,
already
it's
seen it.
I'm kind of surprised no one here has actually mentioned SMS. I mean, we're talking about smartphones and addressable markets.
Yeah.
Like, SMS is billions of people, not
True.
tens or hundreds of millions,
Right.
billions of people.
Right.
And it might not be as high fidelity, but
Good
some of the
point.
most important messages are.
Okay, questions? Please be questions, because I'm forcing these guys. Anybody? Go ahead.
Going back to the privacy question, you mentioned that we shouldn't surprise users. But the problem is what happens if you don't even know the impact? For example, the fact that once you publish something, you may be sure that you want it to go out on Twitter to everyone. You're fine with that. But then this thing gets archived, it's searchable.
Right.
A long time later, someone finds some innocent-looking comment and they take it totally out of context, and that's bound to surprise people and later on. So how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that people understand that, you know, a short snippet today may make sense based on the context people have about you, but then
Okay, one
next one.
person answer that. Who wants to answer that? Google guy.
I think that,
Short.
yeah. So I think on the one hand, there's going to be a generational shift, and part of it is learning about how these tools work. And unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of the media hyping that's going on now to get people to tune into this conversation and become more aware of it. So there's no perfect answer today, but I do think people are going to learn one way or another.
Yeah, I think it's never coming back. I think it's out there and gone forever. There's a New York Post story on my pregnancy that I wish I could get rid of.
Hi. I had a question for all of you, actually, because one of the things that I find is missing in all the social networks today is actually a way in which I can manage my contact group itself. So what I mean is, like, if you look at Twitter, and I'm getting, like, followers. I follow a bunch of people, and I'm here, I meet someone, I add them to my list. Same goes for Gmail, for Yahoo, you know. But when I try to set privacy preferences, you either make me pick every person in my contact and decide how I want to work with them, or I have to come up with groups, which of course change over time. So my question is, why not kind of have someone actually look at managing your contact groups in a way where, as a very simple example, if it could remember the context in which I added or changed a contact, and brings it up to me when I have to set privacy preferences, maybe I can dynamically create groups.
Great question. Yahoo guy should answer that.
Yeah, you know, for us, it comes, again, back to that diversity. We do have a lot of different places where you can manage these things because, you know, the folks you follow on Flickr aren't necessarily the folks in your address book, aren't necessarily the people you email frequently. And I think there's a tension there, not only with that, but with the way people use things. You know, you could, for example, be a Facebook user that's a family broadcaster. You have 20 people. Maybe managing the whole list all at once is totally appropriate. On the other hand, you probably have more than 20 friends, and they're probably, you know, different levels of closeness. And so it is at times challenging to build a product that satisfies both types, to satisfy a commercial entity on Twitter, like a brand or a product that's being followed, has different needs and capabilities, you know, for management than an individual, right? And so it is a challenge. I don't think there's any single solution. If there were, I think somebody in the industry would have stumbled on it already.
Quick questions, everybody, so I want to get everyone's question.
Quick question for, this is for Twitter. You guys announced your Library of Congress preservation deal last month. And I think that to the first question that was asked about retention of that data, and I think that is going to be a hot button issue, particularly for younger people, younger generation. They say a lot of stuff that, I mean, watch trending topics and imagine that being archived in perpetuity. So I was wondering if I could maybe get you to address maybe on the user case that you would allow people to opt out of that. So it's not the default, because the only way to kind of not be in the Library of Congress is to kill it on the 23rd week, which is what the hackers like me, I packed together an app just to do that, so that won't happen, you know what I mean? Because I think the intention is the real-time communication. It's not necessarily, it gets stale, and after that, it has very little value for the author. It has value for everybody else, but not the author. So I was wondering if you have given any thought to allowing users to opt out of that fire hose feed to Library of Congress.
He doesn't want all his little updates from right before he goes to
Or
sleep.
kids, for that
Kids,
matter.
yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I can't speak for the the whole company because I don't know the exact details of it. In general, obviously we have delete features and you can't selectively opt out of specific syndication deals. But I know that there are ways to be able to delete that data out. And we, all of our syndication deals, when we send a delete through the system, they have to respect those deletes also. So I don't know if there's a single button you can go click to go opt out of that one specifically, but it's something I have to look into.
No, there's not. But the deal was that there's a 6-month embargo or a period in which you can delete it, right?
Right, and then after that, it will
But
go
people
to-
won't. So
Yeah.
again, we've had programmers that come up with ways around it. But anyway,
That's a very good point.
retention I think is going to
That's
be
a
a
very
huge
good point. I'm going to
issue.
go on to the next question. That's an excellent point. 200 years from now, someone is going to be researching at the Library of Congress, reading all those Twitter feeds, and is going to want to know what the hell was wrong with our society. Go ahead.
I don't know where the social web is going, but I know that it's getting a lot more complicated very quickly. And you guys keep adding features and changing things, and people are getting more and more dazed and confused. So,
Yeah.
are
That's
you
because they all
gonna
have
keep-
ADHD, FYI, just so you know.
So are you guys going to keep doing that? Or do you think there'll be a backlash and you guys will be forced to make things more transparent and simpler and easier to use?
Well, it's just the nature of software that the first thing you look at is adding features. Reducing complexity is a much harder problem than adding a new feature. Over time, I would see, and you do see some shift in the public spec groups about just adding richer metadata around it. Even this Open Graph protocol is very interesting because it simplifies the problem of when someone shares content on a site, it makes it much easier to scrape the content. So as far as adding features...
No, it's going to be more complex. I'm going to answer.
I don't think you're ever going to...
Microsoft guy, who they love features at Microsoft.
Yeah, I don't know how you can, like, why would you measure software based on the number of features you build and ship? Like, that's, like, it's about the killer experience that you're giving consumers. And so, like, I'm not about pushing code every night, but creating something that's coherent across, like, the phone or the PC or the inbox or the IM. Like, I mean, feature count is dumb. Like, listen to Dave
And
McClure,
yet you
shoot a
all
feature
keep coming
in the
out
head.
with more features than you can imagine. It is true. It's completely confusing. I agree with you. You're absolutely right. Very quick, I would like to get to everybody if you can do
So
it.
Google TV came out today, and it brings up the new social context of the living room. And I know, is there some way in Android for more than one person in the family to be logged in? Are we no longer going to be fighting over the remote, but over the login? Is anybody else dealing with the collective identity piece that goes into social behavior?
I'll try to address that quickly so that we can get all the other questions. But what I saw today was that there can be multiple Android devices that are tethered to the same TV. Now, from an identity perspective, that confuses the hell out of me, but I think it's awesome. So there's this whole weird context and confluence of identities being used simultaneously on a computing device that we've not seen before, which raises a whole host of questions which don't have clear answers. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when there are two Android devices tethered to a machine, and then it has to figure out what kind of recommendations to provide to one or two or both of those people. So I don't have a great answer. I think the Xbox
it's the same old story, fighting over the remote. Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's a good social
No,
experience.
I want to
right?
watch The Notebook. No, I want to watch Terminator. Anyway.
So it's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's true. It's why they're going to, I've seen some people carry, it's the one person in the room right now who gets precedence over others.
But so the Android, the TV shown today actually allows for both to control.
Yet
Yeah, it was
utterly confusing.
Utterly.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Real quick.
So this is I'd like an answer from each of you, but it's gonna be really quick.
Oh.
What open initiative do you see as being most important for developers to watch over the next 6 months? For example,
one word
activity
answer
streams,
for
et
everyone.
cetera.
Activity streams.
Ditto.
There's too many to give an answer.
Mobile.
I think the Open Web Foundation legitimize everything. Like, let's do it properly.
OAuth and identity, broadly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. Right here.
One of the things I saw in Buzz early on was all sorts of, it aggregated things from Twitter, from other places, and I loved that about it, and I'm wondering if you see more of that sort of aggregator so people can come in from various silos using whatever interface they want and get their information together.
aggregation is not the answer either. It's like, otherwise you end up with more like confusing stuff together. You got to bring it together, curate it, and then surface it in the right area at the right time. Like aggregation is not, it's just a way to hear people shouting.
Well, at the same time, I think one of the things that I'm most interested in seeing how activity streams can actually be used as a cross-industry way of moving this information around on the first side, and then on the second side, allowing for relevancy engines to actually custom tailor information so that it's more relevant, more interesting, based on the things that you care about. I know, for example, I had my Twitter feed pulled into Buzz in the beginning, and a lot of people hated it because it was completely non-contextual, and it seemed like I had Tourette's or something, so I had to turn it off. However, over time, there might be more interesting social fidelity that can be derived from more and more richer metadata. So I think that the final answer is not there yet, but these streams allow for more experimentation to occur.
Okay, sorry guys, she just told me I had one more question. This one over here is waiting. Sorry. You can guys come up afterwards and ask them.
What are your thoughts on projects like Diaspora? Do they have a shot in the future against social networks like Facebook?
There's no Facebook person here, so.
So Diaspora is a sort of distributed, open, privacy-centric, something, keyword, buzzword, aware social network that raised $170 bazillion on Kickstarter. Which,
I mean, there are other projects like that too.
Yeah.
And other projects like that. And I don't mean to disparage it at all. I think it's actually really important. And I think it's really important for the ecosystem and for a broader community to have conversations about projects like that. However, I think that it's incredibly important for projects like that to also promote the adoption of technologies that already exist, that have been developed over the last several years to solve those problems specifically, because if we just end up with more fragmentation or more geeks running this stuff on their own hardware, we're not actually solving the problem for the broader audience. So I really want to see them succeed, and I want to see them contribute to the ecosystem.
I kind of look at like a little tea party of social
yeah, it's
networking.
the tea party of the open source social web. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more of these random little vertical social networks or random horizontal social networks in different geographies. I mean, Cara, you were trashing Orca for being big in Brazil.
I didn't trash Orca.
I mean,
I'm just saying they're big in Brazil.
Well, you said it's
It's not as big a deal as being big in the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world, but just me.
Like, I think even though on the surface it looks like there's aggregation, and sure everyone may have a account with a certain social network, there's going to be more and more of these distributed networks, more fragmentation for more niche things.
You're right,
and we just need to bring it
by the
together.
way, I like Little Orchid. He's adorable. He's a sweetheart.
And by the way, I like Gowalla. I didn't mean to trash
No, that's
Gowalla
all right.
before. I just
That's it. Say Gowalla again, because it sounds better in Australian. It does. But anyway, sorry, your last thing? Did you want to? No. Okay, great. You guys, come by. Come and ask them any questions you want. They'll hang around here for a minute. And then thank you very much, and please give them a round of applause. They did a great job.
Thank you, Cara. Awesome.